I then mentioned to him the plot to massacre the English officers and drive the English out of Sicily, said to have been discovered in 1810, I think, by blank. Carolyn said he was very capable of forming such a plot. I believe, however, that blank invented a great part of it and also betrayed you at the time, that he pretended to make such important discoveries. Murat got information from some officer in the English service. I said that blank had frequently gone over to Calabria disguised as a peasant. Very probably he betrayed you every time he went, replied Napoleon. He spoke about the Corsicans, observed that they were brave and revengeful by nature, the best friends and the most inexorable enemies in the world. Their prominent national character, added he, is never to forget a benefit or an injury. For the slightest insult in Corsica, una archibugiata, murders are consequently very common. At the same time, no people are more grateful for benefits conferred, and they will not scruple to sacrifice their lives for the person who bestowed them. 25th. Had some conversation with Napoleon relative to Count Bertrand having been stopped by sentinels a few days back when going towards Mr. Wilton's cottage. Napoleon said that he supposed the sentinel had orders to stop all suspicious persons, similar to those given to the one at Hut's Gate, and observed in a laughing manner that the French were the only suspicious people in the island, told him that a report had arrived in the island of war having been declared between Spain and America, and Russia and America. Russia and America, said he? Impossible. If it takes place, I shall never be astonished again at any circumstance that happens. The Spaniards will be well drubbed. I said that one of the American large frigates could take a Spanish 74. This he would not believe. I then said that during the War with Spain, one of our frigates, which were smaller than the Americans, would not have been afraid to attack a Spanish 74. Napoleon looked at me in rather an incredulous manner, shook his head, laughed, and said, Sempre per la Marina, dottore. She certainly would have been taken. I replied that if the weather was bad, I did not think so. He said that there had never been an instance on record of a frigate having taken a 74. 29th. Dined with Sir Pulteney Malcolm in town. Count Bellarmine came to pass the evening, during the course of which he had a long conversation with me. He said that he had that day met General Gourgaud near the Alarm House, and that finding himself in a very delicate situation, he had told the general that his position was very embarrassing, as it appeared that he, Bellarmine, was an object of suspicion to the governor, that he must consequently beg to decline any further communication with him beyond the customary salutations of politeness, however unpleasant it was to do so in a place where there was so little French society until after the arrival of the conqueror, which vessel he expected instructions of importance, and such as would clearly point out to him the line of conduct which he was in future to pursue. This, in doing, he had rather gone beyond his present instructions, which were not to éviter ces messieurs-là, but to treat them precisely as he did the inhabitants and other residents of the island, that he could not account for the suspicion manifested by the governor, as it would not be supposed that he was sent to betray. Cipriani in town, on his return, he related the obligations he was under to Sir Thomas Reed, who was very busily employed in assisting him to procure some hams and other articles of provisions out of the company's stores. The 30th. Napoleon has been occupied for some days in dictating and writing observations upon the works of the great Frederick. Told me that when finished, they might probably comprise 5 or 6 octavo volumes, and would consist of military observations and reflections only, with as much details as would be necessary for the explanation of the operations commented above. For several mornings he has been up at 3 a.m. writing. Saw several pages of his handwriting, which was much more legible than any I had before seen. He observed that formerly he was frequently in the habit of writing only half or three-quarters of each word and running them into each other, which was not attended with much inconvenience, as the secretaries had become so well accustomed to it that they could read it with nearly as much facility as if it were written plainly. And, however, no person except one well accustomed to his manner of writing could read it. Latterly, he said he had begun to write a little more legibly in consequence of not being so much hurried as on former occasions. Napoleon then observed that I had made a considerable progress in French since he had first seen me. Though you have, said he, a very bad accent. It has been said by some of the English that I understand Italian better than French, which is not true. Though I speak the Italian very fluently, it is not pure. Non parlo Toscana, nor am I capable of writing a book in Italian, nor do I ever speak it in preference to the French. Speaking about Chateaubriand's attacks upon him, he observed, c'est un de ces lâches qui crachent sur un cadavre. He is like one of those poltroons who spit upon a dead body. Like Pichon and others, he is one of those insects that feed upon a corpse, which, while living, they dare not approach. After some other conversation, I asked him if there had been a sufficiency of provisions for his army on the retreat from Moscow, whether it might not have been accomplished with a loss much smaller than that which they had sustained. Napoleon answered, no. The cold would have destroyed them, even if they had had a sufficiency of provisions. Those who had food died by hundreds. Even the Russians themselves died like flies. May 2nd. General Montalban very ill. Napoleon expressed much anxiety about him. 4th, Baron Sturmer came inside of Longwood and had some conversation with the orderly officer relative to Napoleon. 6th, saw Napoleon, to whom I gave a book entitled Memoirs et Coutumes des Corses, which he ran over frequently, laughing very heartily at several of the anecdotes which were recounted in it. The author, he said, was an ignorantaccio and wholly unacquainted with many circumstances relative to the history, manufactures of Corsica. In fact, that he was either a place hunter or a man who had been bastonato by the Corsicans, that many of the anecdotes he related respecting assassinations which had been committed were true, but that the Corsicans were not in the habit of assassinating strangers, that they were the best friends and the worst enemies in the world, that those who espoused a party remained unchangeable. Even I, continued he, in the height of my power, could never induce the English party to change their opinions, though I offered to receive them all into my service. The admiral said he held a long conversation with me a day or two ago. He praised the governor, said that I was mistaken in him, that he was an extremely well-informed man, and had a good heart at bottom. He was very anxious that I should meet him on an opportunity that soon would be afforded by the arrival of the ambassador, when he suggested that we might meet as if nothing had previously occurred. I told him that he did not know the governor, that until he changed his conduct, I would not see him unless by force. I observed that he might, without any discussion, alter his restrictions and treat me as I would myself treat a person placed in a similar situation. In fact, in a word, put matters upon the same footing as he found them, and nearly so. But that it would not answer, no purpose for us to meet. I complained of the ill treatment I received. He says, I comply with my instructions. This was always his excuse. Now, although I am convinced of his instructions, and that they specify no more than he should take every precaution to prevent my escape, and otherwise to treat me well, and with as little possible expense as may be, yet I could not well tell him that he asserted falsehoods. All that I could reply would be by making a comparison, in doing which you must always exaggerate, by likening him to a hangman, who, while he puts a rope around your neck to dispatch you, only executes his orders. But that is not a reason that you should be obliged to make a companion to him, or receive him until the mode of execution. I could only say this, and tell him that if such were his orders, he had disgraced himself by accepting a dishonorable employment, that if he had not, he was still worse, and being the contriver of such, as long as he treats me a la Botany Bay, so long will I not see him. I certainly would understand not to see the commissioners and not enter houses, which he said he suspected.